The air brakes screamed like a wounded animal. Frank Miller's coffee went everywhere, across his flannel shirt, across 30 years of safe driving instincts that told him something was wrong. Through his bug-splattered windshield, he saw a tiny figure, a toddler in a red jacket, no older than 3, walking barefoot down the center line of Interstate 20. He threw open the cab door before the truck fully stopped. Dear God. Frank was 67 years old. Weathered hands, gray beard, a faded military tattoo on his forearm. But he sprinted across that hot asphalt like a man half his age. The boy didn't cry, didn't scream. He just stood there, thumb in his mouth, staring at Frank with eyes that looked familiar. Pale blue, almost gray, dirt-streaked cheeks, sunburned nose. Frank scooped him up, checked for injuries. Nothing broken, but no shoes, no adult, no car anywhere in sight. Where's your mama, son? Where's your daddy? The boy pointed down the empty highway. Then he whispered 2 words that made Frank's blood run cold. Daddy left. Frank's eyes dropped to the child's backpack, faded blue with cartoon dinosaurs. And there, embroidered in blue thread, was a name that made him stagger backward. Frankie Miller. His own name. At the hospital, Frank sat in a plastic chair while nurses examined the boy. A deputy sheriff stood nearby, taking notes. Sir, you're saying you don't know this child? Frank's voice cracked. I'm saying, I might know who his mother was. He pulled out a cracked leather wallet. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman with the same pale blue eyes, laughing beside a Christmas tree. Written on the back, Daddy and Me, 1995. Her name was Sarah, his only daughter, his only child. She was 17 when Frank's wife passed. Cancer, the kind that takes everything slow and leaves nothing behind but medical bills. Frank drove longer routes, picked up extra loads, worked himself to the bone to keep their little house, to keep Sarah in school. He taught her how to change a tire, how to check the oil, how to stand on her own 2 feet. Then she met him. Richard Whitmore III. Old money. Oil money. The kind of man who measured people's worth by their bank accounts. Frank remembered the first dinner they shared. Richard cutting his steak, glancing at Frank's calloused hands with visible disgust. So, Frank, you drive trucks. For a living. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Frank tried. Lord, he tried. He smiled. He stayed polite. He bit his tongue until it bled. But after the wedding, the phone calls grew shorter. The visits stopped. Sarah's voice became distant, rehearsed, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. Then Richard made it official. Frank drove 6 hours to see his daughter. She was visibly pregnant, tears in her eyes. But Richard stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance like a palace guard. Sarah has a new life now, Frank. A better life. Your lifestyle isn't something we want around our children. The door slammed in his face. The deadbolt clicked. Frank never saw his daughter again. She passed during childbirth. Complications. He read about it in the newspaper. Richard didn't even call. When Frank showed up to the funeral, Richard tore his framed photograph from the memorial table and threw it in the trash. Security escorted Frank out while he reached for his daughter's casket one last time. You're not family, Richard hissed. You never were. Frank lost his wife, then his daughter, then his right to grieve. 3 years passed. Frank didn't stop driving. Couldn't. The road was the only place the memories didn't catch up. He passed through 47 states, slept in rest stops, ate cold sandwiches, drove through snowstorms with chains on his tires and ice on his windshield. Every year, he sent a birthday card to an address that sent them back unopened. Every year, a card for a grandchild he'd never met, never held, never even seen a picture of. The pile of returned envelopes grew on his dashboard like a monument to heartbreak. Meanwhile, in the mansion on the hill, Richard's empire was crumbling. The lawyers came first, then the creditors, then the IRS. Newspaper headlines told the story. Whitmore Oil indicted for fraud. Whitmore Holdings faces bankruptcy. CEO Richard Whitmore III accused of embezzlement. His second wife, a blonde woman half his age, left when the accounts froze. She packed her Louis Vuitton bags and didn't look back. All that remained was the child. Little Frankie, 3 years old, sitting alone in empty mansion rooms. Toys scattered on the floor. No one came when he cried. Richard stared at the boy with cold eyes. Then he looked at his passport. A plane ticket to the Cayman Islands. One way out. One escape plan. But children aren't allowed on escape plans. At 4 in the morning, Richard pulled into a gas station. He opened the back door of his rental car, pulled out little Frankie, still half asleep, set him on the curb by Interstate 20, and drove away without looking back. Like luggage, like garbage, like the boy meant nothing. Back at the hospital, Frank's hands trembled as he held the DNA results. A doctor stood beside him. "Mr. Miller, the test is conclusive. This child is your biological grandson." Frank looked through the glass at little Frankie, who was playing with a toy truck a nurse had given him. The boy made engine sounds with his mouth, just like Frank used to do with Sarah when she was small. Frank laughed through his tears. His name was Franklin. Franklin David Miller. Sarah had named him in secret, after her father and her grandfather. A final act of love that Richard couldn't erase. The police found the security camera footage in 6 hours. Richard pulling the boy from the car, setting him on the highway, driving away, license plate visible. Richard thought he was free, thought he'd gotten away clean. He walked toward his yacht at the marina, carry-on bag over his shoulder, sunglasses on, smiling like a man without a care in the world. Then 4 sheriff's vehicles pulled into the parking lot. Richard Whitmore III? Richard spun around, his face drained of color. Behind the deputies stood Frank Miller, in his worn flannel shirt, holding little Frankie in his arms. "You're under arrest for child abandonment, child endangerment, and attempted flight from prosecution." The handcuffs clicked around Richard's wrists. His Rolex glinted in the sunlight as they turned him around. "This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my lawyers are?" Frank stepped forward. Little Frankie waved at Richard, innocent, unaware. Frank's voice was calm, steady, like a man who had waited a long time for this moment. "Your lawyers can't help you now, Richard. And that boy? He's got a family. A real family. Something your money couldn't buy him." At that moment, Richard realized the truth. The regret on his face said everything. The arrogance melted away. The pride crumbled. All that remained was a hollow man in handcuffs, watching everything he thought mattered disappear. If this reveal shocked you, please subscribe to join our family for more stories like this. The yacht club members gathered. Whispers. Pointing. Richard was led past them in handcuffs. A woman gasped. A man shook his head in disgust. The people Richard spent his life impressing watched him escorted out like a common criminal. Because that's exactly what he was. Richard Whitmore III was convicted of felony child abandonment and sentenced to 15 years in state prison. His assets were liquidated. His name became synonymous with disgrace. Frank got full custody. He sold his big rig, bought a small house with a yard and a tire swing, learned to make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. One afternoon, Frank and Frankie visited Sarah's grave together. Frank knelt down and helped the boy place flowers against the headstone. "That's your mama, son. She loved you more than anything in this world. And she loved your grandpa too. Don't you ever forget that." Little Frankie hugged Frank's leg and looked up at him with those pale blue eyes, Sarah's eyes. "I won't, Grandpa. Promise." Frank's hand, rough, calloused, scarred from decades of honest work, rested gently on the boy's small shoulder. Some men build empires out of money and fear. They stand tall until the first wind blows. Frank Miller built his life out of love and labor. Out of showing up, even when no one noticed. Out of never giving up on the people who mattered. He never got to say goodbye to his daughter. But every day, he gets to say good morning to her son. On the mantel of their little farmhouse sits a framed photo of Sarah, young and smiling. Next to it, a new photo, Frank and little Frankie, matching flannel shirts, matching grins. You can inherit a fortune. You can marry into power. You can buy the biggest house on the hill. But you cannot buy character. You cannot purchase loyalty. And you will never, ever be able to fake the kind of love that makes a man drive 1,000,000 miles, just hoping his daughter might call. Richard learned that money can buy a house, but it cannot buy a home. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Tell us in the comments below.